Many people think that we're way more mystical than we really are. So they think like, are you reading my mind? Or like, why do you think your boyfriend did this? Or why do you think your mom did this? Like they have this idea that maybe we can have like magical powers or something, that we can do these things that we just really can't do. My name is William O'Brien. I'm a visiting professor at Duke Quinshon University. I'm here for the 2019 to 2020 academic year. My home university is Bowling Green State University in Ohio, USA, where I teach in the clinical psychology training program, and I have a lab called the Mindful Behavior Therapy and Psychophysiology Lab. My training is in clinical psychology and my specialty is in behavioral medicine. In general, like a psychology major at an undergraduate level really involves trying to provide students with an opportunity to learn about psychology as a science. So we think of psychology in a lot of ways, it's kind of in the middle between natural science and social science. It's kind of in the middle. And depending on who you talk to, it can be one way or another. I feel much more aligned with natural sciences because I like biology. But certainly there are people who are looking at the social science more too. But in both cases, we think of it as a scientific discipline. So there's basically clinical psychology, which is focused on assessing and treating people with various kinds of problems, typically health or mental health problems. Neuroscience, which is the study of the brain and how the brain works. Cognitive science, which is really related to neuroscience now, which is studying how mental processes work, like memory, attention, language. Developmental psychology, which investigates how people change across the lifespan. Industrial organizational psychology, which studies psychology of the workplace and how work is related to psychological variables and how industries function as an organization, like organizational development. Social psychology, which is a study of groups of individuals. And currently, if you go from like the most popular to the least popular, it's going to be clinical psychology, industrial organizational psychology, neuroscience, cognitive science, developmental, right? In terms of numbers of people that are applying, and it roughly correlates with numbers of jobs. The main skills are definitely going to be critical thinking, learning how to think like a scientist. And that doesn't matter if you're in clinical or IO or anything. It cuts across all of them is to really begin to think like a psychologist and a scientist. Then the second one that this is more my own opinion. No, this isn't my own opinion. This is true. Ethics, being ethical. So we really try to train students to understand ethics. And by ethics, we mean how to treat people fairly and in a just way. So when you're doing research, you're not taking advantage. You're not using psychology to damage people, or you don't want to use psychology to harm people or to manipulate people. So the kind of the overarching principle is beneficence, meaning do no harm. And then for me, I think this is my part, is like learning empathy, that we're really talking in psychology about human beings, about people. They're usually organized in a curriculum that would have like two components. One component would be teaching you the topic areas, like, okay, let's teach you about general psychology, like introduction to psychology. Then typically they'll have classes in developmental psychology. How do people change from birth to old age? We know that children think differently than older people, and older people, there's a lot of different characteristics that correspond to age, so that's developmental psychology. Neuroscience is clearly something we want everyone to learn about, how the brain works, what are the different parts of the brain. Abnormal psychology, when things go wrong, what are the characteristics of different kinds of mental health problems that people have. The last two areas are research methods. We teach people psychological research methods. How do you go about conducting a study? And what are the different kinds of studies you can conduct to evaluate psychological theories and hypotheses. And then last is statistical training. Everybody will get at least 1 or 2 classes in statistical methods, because the way we interpret data from an experiment requires statistical knowledge. So all psychology programs will have those elements in them from a course perspective. Then usually they'll also want students to have direct research experience. So not only reading about it in a class, but actually engaging in research as they progress through the program, so that they will be involved with a professor, usually, in designing an experiment or designing a study, collecting data, evaluating data, and writing up the results. So that's a very big part of all psychology training, is to give students opportunities to actually conduct independent research as they proceed. And some programs, and many I think, would also encourage students to gain applied experience. So we have the research experience over here, conducting studies. Then applied experience would be maybe working in a clinic, or working in a hospital, or working with children, or going to a school, to see how psychology can be used to help people with problems or to improve educational systems. So it's sort of like applying psychology principles to the real world.